and welcome to another edition of Osceola Chat. My name is Pat Burnham, and I'm joined today by Jerry Kutz, the publisher of the Osceola, managing editor Bob Barante, and we're very happy to have FSU new offensive coordinator Ken Dillingham join us today. Kenny, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us a little bit. Obviously, it's a very different time for all of us with what's going on with COVID-19, and kind of want to start out with a question revolved around that. What are you and your family doing while you're sheltering in place? And from a personal standpoint, what's been the upside as a husband and being at home?
Well, I mean, lunch break, I now walk the dog with the wife around the neighborhood. So you just get to see your family more because you're at home. I think one of the, everything's a blessing and a curse, and I think you got to find the good in everything. And I think the good everybody's finding in this is you are around your family more. You're finding ways to entertain yourself in situations you normally wouldn't. We're playing more games. We're playing more cards. We're doing a lot more family things that people did 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, before all the cell phones. You're now back into these modes where you're just stuck with you and your family or you and your loved ones. Find ways to entertain yourself. And we're taking the situation extremely seriously. We're completely quarantined here at home, and we're just making the best of every day.
Jerry? I think you're on mute, Jerry. All right, Coach, I got a question for you. Obviously, you started coaching in high school. What was that like, being a high school student and coaching with your peers?
It was a great learning experience because you got to learn the boundaries of coaching. And I think me having coached at such a young age and starting so young, I learned that every player just wants to get better. And they don't care your age. They don't care what you look like. All they care about is, can you help them get to where they want to get to, not just in football, but in life? Can you grow them as a man? Can you grow them as a football player? So for me, that experience taught me that as long as I could add value to them, as long as I could teach them things, that they would respect me. And respect is not being the disciplinarian. Respect is being somebody that they respect because of your knowledge. And I firmly believe that's where I learned that style of coaching from, is because at such a young age, the only thing that could demand respect was knowledge. So I had to go learn. I had to create a knowledge. That way those guys would respect me.
How big an impact do you think that has had on your college career and being able to be such a successful coach at such a young age?
Well, I don't know about the successful at a young age. We got a long way to go for that. But I do think that is a big reason I'm here, is just because that's how I approach every day. I don't think respect is given. I believe it's earned. I've got to respect my players. I've got to respect our coaches. I've got to add enough value for them to respect me. Because at the end of the day, that's what everybody's searching for. Every player wants that knowledge. And if I have enough knowledge that I could coach it and teach it, then I can be respected. And there's one thing to know something. There's another thing to be able to teach it. And I think that's the biggest thing in high school, other than that aspect, was how can you teach it? Because the biggest difference between a teacher and a coach, coaching is teaching, but when you get a student athlete as a freshman, you have a freshman student athlete who may have come from a program where they know nothing, and you have a redshirt senior who may have been in 4 offenses, right? But you're in the same meeting room for the same hour. So how do you teach those two people with completely different backgrounds, completely different knowledges of the offense, of football, and be able to articulate that for them both to learn it? And that is the challenge in coaching. So,
Coach, who were your biggest influences, as you were learning football? Who were the coaches that you gained the most from?
When I was first in high school, there was a guy named Kelly Cook. He was a freshman. He was our freshman offensive coordinator. He was the backup quarterback at Nebraska for Scott Frost. And that's when I first learned. He was a big triple option guy. I learned the run game and the triple option. We had a defensive coordinator at Chaparral High School named Conrad Hamilton, who played 7 or 8 years for the Giants and the Falcons, who was a phenomenal defensive mind, who I got to learn defensive football from, because I say I learned football from a defensive side, and that's how I think of it. That's because of him. And then from an overall managing of people, a guy by the name of Charlie Regal, who was my head coach, who's now the special teams coordinator at Cal. But the staff I was on, and I was blessed at a young age at Chaparral High School, the special teams coordinator at Cal, 2 guys that work in the personnel department for the Broncos, the second in command for the personnel department for the Patriots, Dave Ziegler, the old D-line coach for the University of Arizona, a Hall of Famer high school head coach and a Hall of Famer in the NFL, and 2 successful businessmen. So the people I surrounded myself with, or I was blessed to be around at a young age in coaching, kind of molded me from all different angles. And then when I got to college, Mike Norvell obviously had a huge impact on me, and Brian Lindgren and Calvin McGee would be the other 2. Calvin McGee, the old OC of Michigan, West Virginia, Arizona, and then Brian Lindgren, who's currently the offensive coordinator at Oregon State.
Yeah, I know Coach McGee. He coached with my father at University of South Florida. Coach, you had 12 tour duty workouts and 3 days of spring practice with your team. What stood out to you about your side of the ball, and what excites you most about getting those guys back out on the field?
I think they want to be great. I think there's an emphasis on – nobody came to Florida State to play. And what I mean by that is some schools you go to because you want to get on the field. Some schools you go to because you want to win a championship. Florida State's one of those schools that you come to because you love winning. And I think for those guys, you could see the passion behind that they want to get back to where Florida State's always been. And so for them, the passion and the intensity to want to do right. I'm excited to get back on the field because we got to learn how to own the football. We have bad ball security right now. So for me, that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited to get back so we can fix habits, break habits, improve on good habits, and get to where we need to be offensively. There's not one thing that I'm excited about getting back on the field on. The most important thing I can say is teaching our guys to hold the ball with the elbow in and tip of the ball up and to own the football, because the only way you score in this game is to have the football. So when we have it, we want to keep it.
Coach, that surprised me, honestly, in those first 3 days, or only 3 days, how much time you spent right at the beginning of practice on ball security. Obviously, you made it a priority.
There's no question. I mean, the only way you can score is to have the ball. And if we don't turn the football over, they can't score. And if we have the ball, right, we're the only team that can. So for us, being able to maximize the opportunities, you may get anywhere between 9 and 16 opportunities within a football game to have a possession. If 3 of those are turnovers and you have 12 possessions, or let's say 10 possessions, and 3 of those are turnovers, 33% of your chances to score are out the window. So now you only have 66% of chance to put points on the board, which is giving yourself 30 and 70% chance. Gives yourself almost no chance to be successful. And it's vice versa on defense. Create takeaways, and the more possessions we get, the more opportunities we get. So the biggest thing for an offense for me is taking care of the football. And then if you're consistent enough moving the football, you're going to score 10 more points a game with 0 turnovers than you would with 3, based off of just possessions and your success rate offensively.
Coach, how are you guys functioning as an offensive staff and watching film and implementing the offense as a staff? What's a day like for you guys on the offensive side of the ball?
About 7:30, 8 a.m. We'll get together and we'll stream video. All of our offensive staff will be on a Zoom call similar to this and similar to what most people around the country are doing right now. And we'll stream video and we'll talk through plays and we'll watch every single play from the last year at Memphis. And we'll talk through the plays, talk through the looks, talk through how we're going to communicate this, how we're going to teach our players. Because that's the biggest thing is we can sit in that room I guess it's not a room, whatever you want to call it. We can sit on that on that cloud, on that internet, and we can talk all day long. But if we don't teach each other how we're going to teach it and explain it to our players, then we're kidding ourselves. It's not about what we know. It's about what they know. So what we're going through is how are we going to teach this, and what is the easiest way to teach this? That way there's carryover from play to play.
Has it benefited you guys as a staff to have this extra time to do that kind of thing? I know it's obviously not ideal because you're not with your players, but as internally as a offensive staff, has that been a benefit to you?
Oh, it's definitely a benefit to get this time to all watch an entire season, which we didn't get to do, and talk through issues, talk through more problems that you can't talk through when you have a month before spring ball, because that's the situation we had. So there were some issues some plays we didn't install or weren't planning on installing in spring just because we didn't have enough time to self-scout it. This is giving us the time to self-scout it as a full staff and put together a plan moving forward with our guys. Now, I would not trade one for the other, because at the end of the day, this is a player-driven game. And anything you do that your players aren't getting better from is a small fraction of actually what matters on game day. So for us, we are getting better. It is helping us, but the players is what matter. And I'm excited to hopefully this issue and across the country and the world ends sooner rather than later, like everybody, and we can get back to business as usual.
Coach, how you mentioned that you watch Memphis film?
Yes, sir.
Did you watch? I mean, how much self-scouting of Florida State have you all done?
Not much. When we first got here, we watched a little bit, mainly just for what positions and where we felt like we needed to recruit athletically. So that was more recruiting self-scout. We didn't judge any player going into this deal. The player got a brand new slate. Because the biggest thing about football is there's so many ways to skin the cat. There's so many ways to coach that if we sit back here and watch film and say, okay, well, this was an MA, this was a mistake by this player. For our system, it may not have been a mistake in the prior system. So for us, it's unfair for us to judge them off what we feel are mistakes when we don't know how they were coached. We don't know what they were told because every system's different. So for us, that was more, where do we stand athletically is why we watched ourselves when we first got here, right? But that had no bearing on where we feel like we were as a football team.
The other thing is opponents. You've got to try to get comfortable with teams that you're going to play this year. Does this summer give you a chance to do that?
No question. Every spring recruiting season, what we do, and going into the summer, we will always do a self-scout of the first 4 or 5 most important games. Usually those are the first 5 games of the year, but if there's ever a rivalry game, we'll throw that one in there just for fun, just so everybody kind of sees them. So that will still happen. That will still start in about 3 to 4 weeks, where we'll self-scout the conference as a whole and kind of get comfortable with the defensive coordinators in the league, get comfortable with how teams attack, because every league's a little bit differently. Usually every league has its own little flair to it, whether it's the 3 safeties in the Big 12 or whether it's a 4-down front in the SEC. Every league has its own little flair defensively. So just getting a beat on what that flair is in this league.
Has this allowed you to get a head start on West Virginia at all, Coach?
Yes, sir. That same mold. We're gonna go in and watch those first, 4 to 5 opponents and really get a full self-scout. And what we do is we basically put together a game plan for those future opponents. And it's not that we live and die by that game plan, but we put one together. And then when we get to that game week, we basically start over. But then we go back to our notes that we had in the summer and in the spring and say, okay, you watch something twice, there's 10 ways to attack the same thing. So if an idea you had in spring is the same or the first thing that comes to your mind in fall, usually your mind's on the same page, which means, okay, that's probably a good idea because you forgot you even watched, or you may have vague memory. So I think the more times and the more eyes you can get on something and then kind of take a break and then refresh yourself and see, okay, am I thinking about this the exact same way? Or do I have a different way to attack this time I watch it? And then being able to take those ideas and make the game plan small enough to be able to use it. Because sometimes time is a curse. Sometimes you got so much time, you got so many great ideas that you have as a coach and a coaching staff who spent 5,000 hours, and then you teach your players in 20 hours a week, and it's not nearly as fun.
You outcoach yourself.
Correct.
Hey, Coach, speaking of players, I know you're limited with what you can do with them in the summer, or I'm calling this the summer, by phone. But what are the 2 or 3 things that you concern yourself most about for your players, their health and well-being right now? What are the
Well,
things
I think right now, just one, staying home. That's not normally on the list, but right now, these are 18 to 22-year-olds, and being able to inform them that this is a serious issue happening in the country and throughout the world right now. Being home, you don't need to go anywhere. Stay home. Stay home. And so I think that's one, which is something that we don't normally talk about. But then the other things would be usually when kids go home in the summer or when you're not around guys, lifting and eating. Those are the 2 things that go first. Is when you don't have that structure in that weight room that you normally lift in every day, and you don't have those protein shakes being shoved down your throat, or you don't have me saying, hey, send me a photo of you drinking that protein shake that's in the fridge. When you don't have those demands daily, I think that's usually the first thing that goes. So for me right now, it's the lifting and the weight gain. And then because this isn't summer, normally I would say conditioning / film work. So are you watching film? And when I say watching film is watching installs. And then we also, and that's completely voluntary by them. We can't monitor it. We can't do anything from that standpoint. But are you watching film on your own? And are you watching future opponent film? I want our quarterbacks to be able to create game plans. Why do you want to run this play? And I want them to teach it to me, because it may not be the best play to run, but it gets their mind thinking, why was this not the best play to run? And why is this play better? That made them better, because next time when we face that defense, they understand the why. They know the strengths, they know the weaknesses. So I want them to put together game plans and teach. That way, if they do fail, they learn from it.
All right, Coach. Now we want to have a little bit of fun with you. We want to ask you some unfootball related questions. All right, I'll start with, who is your favorite follow on Twitter? I know you're active on Twitter. Who's your favorite follow?
My favorite follow? That's boring. I mean, woo. I don't know. Mike Norvell. Is that a great answer or what?
It's very PC.
I mean, I think that's the best answer I could have ever given.
It's very PC. I like it. Okay, all right. We're all in self-quarantine now. If you could take any 3 people from any point in history that you could be quarantined outside of your immediate family, who would they be?
Oh, Pete Carroll. George Washington. I don't know, first president. I mean, that'd be a pretty cool person to meet. And probably Martin Luther King, because he's one of the greatest leaders of all time. So being able to learn the leadership skills from him, I think that'd be pretty remarkable. Then I think Pete Carroll is one of the most successful coaches that doesn't get enough recognition. I mean, he's won a Super Bowl and national championships. That doesn't happen every day. And he does it through such a different personality. And that'd be somebody I'd love and he'd bring the positive energy. So if I got bored, I would know at least somebody else would bring a lot of juice in a positive nature.
Last book you've read?
Oh my, Harry Potter. Yeah. Now, I will say this. I'm a big book on tape guy. So I will book on tape things when I'm on the road recruiting. I'll download it and I'll book on tape it. So I listen to a lot of books on tape.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you a favorite, but I listen to most things people read. I listen to books on tape when I'm driving around.
Favorite bands or musicians, top 2 or 3?
Jimmy Buffett. That's
Boy, are you in the right state for him?
Yeah, Train.
Okay.
Would be 2. And then, I don't know. I listen to everything. Soldier Boy, just because that's one of the only songs I know. So crank that, that's a Old song. That was back in my high school days.
So,
The last Netflix or Amazon show that you watched or binge watched?
Oh, I can't. The last one I watched was what was it? Oh, The Tiger King. Yeah.
I watched it. What was your favorite? What was your favorite person in Tiger King?
My favorite person?
Yeah, or at least
I mean, it wasn't, but at the end, whoever was on that jet ski, that was he was not my favorite the entire flick, but when he rode in on that jet ski, he had me. I was hook, line, and sinker.
Coach, if we get 20 years from now, well, you'll probably still be coaching in 20 years, but say you're retired. You're retired from coaching. What do you think your players would say about you, and what would you like for them to say about you?
Hopefully they say, I don't know how he's always like that. I don't know how he always is energetic and positive. That's what I would hope they could say, along with we still have a relationship. Because that's something I firmly believe in is a lifelong relationship. Like I said, I have a group chat of all my former quarterbacks that they don't even know each other, but it's one group chat altogether that I text them and check up on them all. And the goal is in about 2 to 3 years, I invite all those guys out to a game a year, and guys who played at Memphis, Chaparral High School, Auburn, all come out to Florida State and hang out and watch a game. Because that's the relationship I want to have when it's all said and done, is one that lasts a lifetime. And what I hope they would say about me is that he cared. He cared and he made me better.
who is your favorite former FSU football player?
Deion Sanders.
Why?
He's the greatest to ever do it. And he marketed himself better than arguably anybody's ever marketed themselves in the history of sports. His nickname is Prime Time. And I think people underappreciate the fact of how he marketed himself and how he utilized his athletic ability to create his own business. And what I mean by that is he was his own business. And the success he had on the field has now carried it over to where he is prime time. He marketed and branded himself so uniquely that he is now the words prime time. And that was his own doing. And to me, that's the most impressive thing about him is it's not all the plays he made. It's not all those things. It's how he understood the business world and how to market himself throughout the entire process.
And what is that?
Oh, sorry, Pat.
No, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, has Odell talked to you about his work ethic and how the guy prepared himself to be?
No question. Yeah, he talked about how he was the hardest worker every day. And the biggest thing, when you think about guys like that, when you think about the greats, and when you think about greats should be at the top of the list, regardless of position, it's really competitiveness.
Yeah.
You compete to win. It doesn't matter what it is. And I talked about that with the offense during tour of duty is we're doing some L drills, and I feel like we're competing, but we're not mad if we lose. It's not okay to lose. You accept it, but it's not okay. There's a difference. You can learn how to lose, but it's not okay. You can't just be okay. We just lose, guys. No, find a way to win. And if you can't, you are going to lose. That's part of it, but it's not okay. You just got to learn how to accept it. There's a difference.
Coach, what is obviously you're from the western side of the United States, grew up in Arizona, spent a lot of your early career out that way. What is the one thing that you enjoy about Tallahassee that's different than Arizona?
Seafood. Oh yeah.
Have you had shrimp?
Harry seafood. I'm all in. All in. So that is the food out here is unreal. And the other thing is the passion. You know, the fans here, the people here, the city here is passionate about Florida State. I mean, absolute passion. Those two things between the food and the passion, the food and the football, I mean, we're in a pretty good spot.
Kenny, one last thing. what would you, we want to wrap this up so you can get back to work. What would be the one thing you would say to our fan base that you would want them to know?
We need you. It matters. Butts in seats, the atmosphere matters. 100%. Most undervalued thing people talk about in sports, especially in football, is the crowd. We get that place rocking. I've heard it's one of the best places to play in college football, if not the best place. That is a competitive advantage. That is a competitive advantage. We want to get this place back to where it was, back to where it should be. In seats, we need people loud, and we need competitive advantage. We want people to come here and know you're not going to come in to Tallahassee and get 40,000 people, get 50,000 people. You're getting a sellout. You better go on silent all game because it's going to be loud, and you better get a lead early, because if you don't and the crowd gets behind us, the rest is history.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time. We know you're busy. Thank you for joining us today. And, of course, we look forward to catching up with you again soon. And hopefully the next time we get a chance to talk, it'll be in person. But certainly hope you and your family stay safe, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you. Y'all as well. Appreciate y'all having me.
Thanks, Kenny.
Go Noles.